Coming back to the next phase of glycogen metabolism, it means glycogenolysis. Say in glycogenesis, we synthesize the glycogen in a sequential pattern. Say, for example, the first UDP glucose synthesis, then the glycogen primer, then the synthesis by means that means glycogen synthase activity, which synthesize the linear pattern of linear chain of glycogen. Then the finally the glucosyl 4,6 transferase, which forms a branching pattern. So, say with respect to glycogenolysis, that means the named impact would break down the glycogen. Here there are two major steps, the glycogen phosphorylase activity and the debranching enzyme activity. Glycogen phosphorylase, just like the opposite of glycogen synthase, which synthesize the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bonds, whereas in case of glycogenolysis, the glycogen phosphorylase will cleave the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bonds. Say for instance, this is the glycogen. For convenience, I am saying, okay, this is a non-reducing end, this is a reducing end, and these are the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bonds. Say how the glycogen phosphorylase act. It will individually, that means in a sequential pattern, it will cleave the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bonds and add the inorganic phosphate that leads to the generation of glucose 1-phosphate. That means it's like, say there is a stretch of a linear pattern of glucose units in a glycogen. It will cleave the alpha-1,4, then add the inorganic phosphate. That means phosphorylation that leads to glucose 1-phosphate. The whole process is called phosphorylation here. The first phase is called phosphorylation. When this happens, just say here they break down so that ultimately it form limit dextrin. Limit dextrin means it is that form of glycogen. That means what we call intermediate form of glycogenolysis. That means breakdown product of glycogen, what we call limit dextrin, which cannot be degraded further. How? Say this is the limit dextrin means consider it as a branching point. The glycogen phosphorylase activity such a way that 4 glucose residues will be present on either side of the branching point. Say this is the branching point, 4 here and 4 here and 4 here. Okay. So anyway, there are 4 glucose residues are present with respect to branching point. So until this stage, the glycogen phosphorylase will happen. Simply the glycogen phosphorylase keep on, the one by one will break down the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bonds and form glucose 1-phosphates individually like that. Then ultimately it form limit dextrin, which is a product of, that means the breakdown product of glycogen in the first phase, and the activity is done that means catalyzed by glycogen phosphorylase. It's just like opposite of glycogen synthase, which we have seen in glycogenesis. Then after the limit dextrin, the most second important point, debranching enzyme. The unique feature of this debranching enzyme is a single polypeptide having 2 enzyme activity, what we call bienzymatic activity. And this bienzymatic activity means there are 2 phases again. Glycosyl 4,4 transferase, number 2 alpha-1,6 glucosidase. Glycosyl 4,4 transferase, just like we got the transferase enzyme, that means glucosyl alpha-4,6 transferase in glycogenesis. Here the glycosyl 4,4 transferase. There it will cleave a small fragment of 5 to 8 glucose units, that means cleaving the 1,4 glycosidic bond and attach to another glucose residue by means of alpha-1,6 glycosidic bond. That means it's a branching enzyme. Extension, elaboration by means of branches. Same concept here also, but it's the opposite form. Glycosyl 4,4 transferase will break down where exactly it will cleave. Say this is the branching point, sparing the first glucose residue. The rest of the, say the 3 to 4 around 3 or 4 glucose residues will be cut down. How? Specifically, it will cleave the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bond here, just sparing the just one glucose residue at the branching point. And what happens after it cleave here? It will attach to the another area. Say this is what exactly this is the limit dextrin. Activity here is here and will transfer to the next another failure. This is how this activity glucosyl 4,4 transferase is how cut down here, attach here, cut down at one particular, that means alpha-1,4 form another alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond at another side, so that it will form a linear fashion. That means linear chain, just pairing one glucose residue at the branching point. Okay. Then second enzyme activity, what we call alpha 1,6 glucosidase. Just like transferase, which particularly cleave and attach the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds. Alpha 1,6 glycosidic bonds cleave the alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. The name it implied. But the thing is, it will lead to release of free glucose unit. You know, we have only one glucose residue at the branching point, and this is alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. This alpha 1,6 glycosidase will cleave the glucose, that means the alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond, that leads to generation of this free glucose. Just free glucose is very important. So the generated product of alpha 1,6 glucosidase is a free glucose. Then we got the linear fashion. That means linear chain of glycogen. And what happens? The same. The phosphorylase will come into play. The activity of debranching, the name it implied, it has completely debranched. That means the debranching activity is done. Then the glycogen phosphorylase will come into play. How? We have already explained. Glycogen phosphorylase, simply it individually break down the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds individually and form glucose 1-phosphate. Say this is the bond, the first bond, the second bond, it will break down here, break down here, break down here, break down here. Likewise, it forms glucose 1-phosphate sequentially. So the entire, whooping, just like few thousands of glucose residues are present in a glycogen, with branching pattern of some around 20 to 30 glucose units on an average per branch, and it's like in a larger than the amylopectin what we see in plants. Here, as we have already explained, glycogen is much, more number of branches are present in the glycogen when compared to the amylopectin of plants. So such a looping, that's a large magnum opus structure, has been degraded to just glucose 1-phosphate. I have told already, degradation of glycogen is glycogenolysis to glucose. It's not that simple. There are several intermediate steps. After glucose 1-phosphate, this has to become glucose 6-phosphate by the catalytic activity of phosphoglucomutase. The same concept in glycogenesis also. The glucose 6-phosphate in the first step become glucose 1-phosphate by phosphoglucomutase. Here the reverse. The glucose 1-phosphate which we get become glucose 6-phosphate by the same enzyme, phosphoglucomutase. Simply it will transfer the phosphate group from one carbon to another carbon in the same molecule, that in the glucose. So 6 to 1, here 1 to 6. That means glucose 6-phosphate to 1-phosphate in the glycogenesis, whereas in case of glycogenolysis, from glucose 1-phosphate to become glucose 6-phosphate. Then we get glucose 6-phosphate. Next, the fate of the glucose 6-phosphate depends on the kind of tissue that the glycogenolysis is taking place. For example, if it is in liver, there is most important enzyme what we call glucose 6-phosphatase. Glucose 6-phosphatase, it will convert glucose 6-phosphate to glucose. And what is the significance? It leads to a liberation of free glucose residues. That is why liver is the ultimate source of free glucose residues and have a huge role in dietary glucose maintenance, what we call glucose balance. Whereas if it is in case of muscle, it doesn't have the glucose 6-phosphatase. Since it doesn't, that means it lacks the glucose 6-phosphatase, the glucose 6-phosphatase will enter into the glycolysis phase. That's it. But in case of liver, since it has glucose 6-phosphatase, it becomes glucose and readily supplied. That means it's like demand supply. Whenever there is a demand for glucose, it will readily supply because of existing glucose 6-phosphate. This is very important. That is why liver is a fundamental, that means it's like a potential source for free glucose units, even for brain also. Okay. So just for a glance, with respect to glycogenolysis, this is a glycogen structure. The glycogen phosphorylase will cleave the individually the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds such that it forms limit dextrin. That means 4 residues on either side of the branching point. Then the debranching enzyme. It is one polypeptide with 2 enzyme activity, glucoside phosphotransferase and alpha 1,6 glucosidase. The first will cut down, say, the sparing the one glucose residue at the branching point, So 3 to 4 glucose residue will cut down simply by cleaving alpha 1 4 glycoside bond here, then transfer to another bond, another area simply by forming alpha 1 4 glycoside bond. Then the glucosidase alpha 1 6 will come into play. It will cut down the alpha 1 6 glycosidic bond, liberating the free glucose. Then the polymer, the lineage polymer comes. Then the glycogen phosphatase will come into play. It will, there's like repetition. Then ultimately form glucose phosphatase, glucose phosphate. Then it becomes glucose 6 phosphate by means of glucose phosphoglucosamidase. Then it depends on the kind of tissue. If it is liver, become glucose by means of glucose 6 phosphatase. If it is in muscle, enters into the glycolysis. This is about the glycogenolysis. These both glycogenesis and glycogenolysis are irreversible. They takes place in cytosol because most of the enzymes of glycogenesis and glycogenolysis present in the cytosol only, and they cannot be reversed back. This is very most important step. Then this is a very important component of glycogen metabolism, in particular any carbohydrate metabolism in general.